Hi dear students, today we are going to discuss a speech delivered by Harold Pinter in 2005. The speech is titled Art, Truth and Politics, and it is included in the second module of the text signatures prescribed for third semester BA BSc degree students for their common course in English under Calicut University. So as I have already mentioned, this speech titled Art, Truth and Politics was the Nobel Prize acceptance speech given by Harold Pinter on 7th December 2005. Harold Pinter is one of the well-known modern British playwrights of the 20th century. He began his career in the theatre with the play The Room in 1957. He is well known for his play The Birthday Party, which was published in 1957. Some of his other well-known plays are The Homecoming, published in 1964, and The Betrayal, published in 1978, which were adapted to the screen as well. Pinter wrote plays for radio, television, and films. He also adapted others' works for the screen. The Servant, which was released in 1963, The Go-Between, released in 1971, The French Lieutenant's Woman, released in 1981, The Trial, released in 1993, are some of the famous adaptations of the works of other novelists Pinter adapted into films. Influenced by Samuel Beckett's works, Harold Pinter delineates the confusions and anxieties of a post-World War society in Europe. The given section, Art, Truth and Politics, is an edited version of his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. It was projected on screen on 7th December 2005 since he was not present at the ceremony due to his illness. In his speech, he criticizes the US government's war policies and its attempts to become the big brother. In the end, he reminds the audience the importance to fight for a war-free, peaceful society for the future generation. The speech also reminds the role of an artist as a citizen to respond, critique, and condemn the injustices enforced by the state. Now let's have a brief outline of the text. Pinter begins the speech by distinguishing between real and the unreal, true and false in the realm of art. But in everyday life, it is important for a citizen to know the truth. In art, as he says, truth is elusive. The idea of a real truth cannot be found in a dramatic art. One comes across many truths and they may challenge or reflect or critique the idea of a single truth. Therefore, the function of language is ambiguous in art. For political theatre, the situation is different. It has to be objective and should not take the form of a sermon, but as a dramatic form, it should represent multiple perspectives. The dramatist should be ready to present a number of perspectives and keep away his own prejudices. But this doesn't work in most cases. He then deviates to some of the contemporary political events to discuss the thin line between true or false in our daily life. He mentions how the war on Iraq was initiated on the basis of an allegation that Saddam Hussein possessed dangerous weapons. Similarly, it was alleged that Iraq shared the responsibility with Al-Qaeda for September 11 attack and declared as a threat to the US. But later it became clear that these two were not true. Therefore, according to Pinter, truth here is what US understood and wanted to present before the world. He then discusses in detail the history of war crimes committed by the US. Though the war atrocities committed by Soviet Union has been documented well, not much has been discussed about US government's war crimes and foreign policies. He says that direct attack on countries has never been a policy of the US. Instead, it preferred low-intensity conflicts, which meant a slow and gradual intervention by planting a malignant growth and allow it to grow and then intervene with military. In the end, United States proclaimed that for protecting democracy, military intervention was needed. Harold Pinter argues that similar pattern can be found in most of the military interventions done by the US across the world. He mentions the example of Nicaragua, where the US has intervened. US supported the Somoza dictatorship in Nicaragua for 40 years. Later, the Sandinistas, supported by the people of Nicaragua, established a government which was stable, decent, and pluralistic. It was a welfare-oriented government, but the United States, after persistent attempts and bloodshed, managed to overthrow the government, thereby restored democracy. Pinter cites several instances like this in Central and South America and countries like Indonesia, Turkey, Greece, Chile, etc. In all these cases, the death tolls of civilians were high, but there was never any mention of the war crimes and atrocities of the United States anywhere. He says it never happened. Nothing ever happened. Even while it was happening, it wasn't happening. He raises questions regarding the collective conscience against these atrocities. He then mentions about the violations done by the United States at Guantanamo Bay prison. The tortures and physical violations committed against the prisoners at Guantanamo are against the Geneva Conventions. He then questions how international community has responded to this. Millions of people across the world has been tortured by the brutal violence committed by the United States. The case of Iraq invasion is a clear example of such violations, and the number of deaths of Iraqi civilians were irrelevant and never counted. Pinter there criticizes British Prime Minister Tony Blair and his associations with US President George Bush in these invasions. In this speech, Pinter vehemently criticizes the United States government's foreign policy from Second World War onwards till the contemporary period. He also points out how the US becomes a threat to every nation with the history of bloodshed and violence that it has committed in these years. He ends the speech by explaining the role of the writer in these political turmoil and how vulnerable an artist in these situations is. He argues that, as a citizen, it is the responsibility of the writer to define the real truth of their society with a great intellectual determination. Such a responsibility is required to restore the dignity of man, which is being violated in these war crimes. Harold Pinter's speech is an explicit political statement against the war atrocities and military interventions carried out by the United States. The speech is a call for justice for the innocent civilians caught up in these warfares. It also reminds the artist community about their responsibility as citizens in condemning the violence of the state. The question of the role of the artist becomes relevant as the speech is delivered to the community of artists and writers at the Nobel Prize ceremony. Unlike the earliest speech by Chaplin, Pinter's speech is less rhetorical. It offers a clear and direct political critique of the state. So that's all about the speech. Thank you.